Hello and welcome to Push Your Glasses Up. I'm Mikey. Today I'm joined once again by Eammon Jacobs to talk about what else but Star Wars. He's just always here for Star Wars, so it's Star Wars. We're going to talk all about Ahsoka and what we mostly liked. Some things we felt could have been a little bit better, but mostly liked. But hey, real quick before we get to that, if you enjoy these videos, please like them, subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you prefer listening to them in an audio-only format, you can find us on podcast services everywhere. And hey, if you've been missing trailer reactions, hopefully... So the writer's strike has been resolved. There is the Screen Actors Guild now on strike, so we're waiting for that because it feels a little weird for me to do trailer reactions while that's all going on. So hopefully that all resolves soon and people get paid fairly and we can get back to doing that. Let's talk about Ahsoka. Eammon, welcome back to the show, bud.
Thanks for having me again, mate. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. It is, for some reason, October is 85 degrees outside, and I want to die a little bit. But yeah, other than that, whatever that means in your temperatures. But yeah, it's it's probably what, like high 30s for you? Is that what that is, or something?
No, it's like, I think it's 19 degrees here.
Oh, okay. High 30s would be 20. Deadly then.
Yeah. High 30s would probably kill us. Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, so it's cooling off a little bit, but yeah, it's kind of weird. I don't know why it's October already. That's not how time works, surely.
I mean, that part of it's fine for me.
3 months away.
Yeah. The October part is fine for me because I like spooky season all the time is fine with me. But yeah, it's too hot. It's too hot for this time of year. It should be dry leaves on the ground that I can like make noise when I'm walking, and it's not. It's just like bright sun, which I'm already not safe for, and hot temperatures.
Same. So
yeah. You of anyone, you understand that. Cool. Well, we are here to talk about Ahsoka. So first of all, because the other show that this leads directly off of, basically, I didn't cover for this podcast at all, and you were certainly not around for that. So what is your history with Rebels?
My history with Rebels is I actually watched Rebels before Clone Wars, because it was just happening to be on at the time when I kind of got back into Star Wars at university. And Rebels was on. I was like, oh, this is a fun, kind of cool show. And then Ahsoka's in it. And I was like, okay, don't really understand who this is. So I went back and watched Clone Wars and was like, oh, I get it now. So Rebels, it's one of those where it was a slow burn. I liked it. And then as soon as you get into season 3 and 4, it just ramps up. And I fell head over heels for it, much like everybody else did.
Yeah. Well, first of all, saying that it came on when you were in college makes me sad and old. But yeah, because that was, what year did it start? 2016? Is that something around there? 2015,
like
maybe?
2015, maybe.
Yeah, I was already in my 30s.
2014.
2014. Okay, so it probably started before November, so I was 29. But yeah, I actually had watched Clone Wars beforehand, which, has its hit or miss aspects to it. The out of order nature of its storytelling and whatnot certainly made it hard to approach. I'll put it that way. But I came off of coming into Clone Wars. I came off of having watched Gendy's Clone Wars before that as well. So like a lot of transitioning for the animated side of Star Wars for me. But as much as I agree that it's a slow burn for the beginning of Rebels, because that's when it's more of like a kid's show, really, really approachable for a younger audience and stuff. I still
definitely.
really appreciate that first episode is so easy to get into because it's Aladdin.
Mhm.
So it's just a really fun little thing to get into. And then it's just, getting to learn about the characters in a fairly lighthearted way at the beginning. You discover Kanan's past and stuff, but like other than that, it is a fairly lighthearted way to get into the show. But like, yeah, I want to say it's like the end of every season, I think, is phenomenal. I think the way that they close out seasons through the whole series was great, but particularly with like 2 is leading into like when 3 and 4 picks up. That finale on 2 is where it like really is like, oh my god, they're transitioning into like a different show now. So I agree that like that back half is just like off of the rails, but it's like Master and Apprentice is where it really like, that's where everything really takes its hold. And it's like, that stuff is like some of the best Star Wars, and it's phenomenal. And so like going into Ahsoka, we have, you and I are lucky enough to have that knowledge, because I do think Ahsoka is a tough show probably to get into for people who did not watch it, because it is a little in the same way that Rebels was a slow burn. This show is a slow burn too, and it kind of has a what's the point? What are they doing? And that connection to the characters ahead of time allows you to forgive that a little bit, because all I cared about is like, we got Ahsoka, we got Sabine, we got like, it's one of those things where I'm like, I understand the criticisms early, but I absolutely loved Ahsoka front to back because of being able to have that like preset knowledge for characters and stuff.
Yeah, I'd agree. Like, the lore surrounding Ahsoka is quite dense, and I'm sure we'll kind of get onto that later on. And obviously, things like the world between worlds, for example, which we kind of assumed was going to be in this, and you have all the Rebels history and why those characters mean so much to each other, let alone the audience. It's all quite complicated. You throw in, 3 seasons of Mandalorian and the cherry-picked stuff from the extended universe that Filoni has pulled from, and it's all quite a lot for sort of new audiences. That being said, I think Rebels and Clone Wars, there are like maybe 6 or 7 episodes that if you watch, like, you are set. Like, that's kind of all you need to know.
Yeah.
Master and Apprentice, obviously, like the season 4 finale, and then obviously like I'd sort of throw in the end of Clone Wars just as a bit of a primer for Ahsoka, and then obviously Mortis if you really want to dive in.
That's like the deep lore stuff.
That is the deep stuff.
That really helps with Ahsoka, but like I feel like you could just not have that knowledge as long as you had character knowledge on her.
Yeah, but like by and large, I think it balanced the line quite well between diving headfirst into the deep stuff and sort of making it accessible, which I kind of appreciated, because I think if it was too much, it would feel like the show was almost alienating everybody, and sort of being a bit gatekeepery, which shouldn't be the vibe. And I'm glad that they didn't do that. It's not the vibe. And I think it's all the better for that. And just, yeah, I loved it. I do have my issues with it, but I mean, it's probably one of the most solid Star Wars series we've ever had, realistically.
Yeah, and I think a big part of that is probably because Ahsoka is kind of Dave's baby. Whereas like, yeah, you could say like Mando and Grogu and stuff also are, but like there's a connection to George with George, casually just saying George for George Lucas, but there's a connection with Dave to George with Ahsoka that isn't there so much with the modern Star Wars TV stuff, that like I think that he probably feels as if he grew up alongside Ahsoka within just making Clone Wars and stuff like that. So it's one of those things where I think that care comes through, and he can convey that to the other directors a little bit more intensely than with like Mandalorian or Book of Boba Fett or, you know, whatever. But Book of Boba Fett was more Robert Rodriguez anyway, but it's way more Robert Rodriguez. But yeah, it's yeah. I'm surprised like El Mariachi just didn't come out and start playing guitar at one point. But yeah, it's one of those things where I'm like, this is the one that like feels like he is like fully in it. Granted, you know, he has his most Filoni episode that he directed in the season of this show since Rebels, since Clone Wars. So like, it is one of those things where it's like, this show has, as much as I love Obi-Wan and most of Mandalorian and stuff, I think this series had more of that special sauce that like he carries, but like it's not always there. It's mostly there in this series. Yeah.
I think he's very clearly like a fan of Lord of the Rings, and I'm pretty sure he said so like a million times. And even without getting into the specifics of it, like that atmosphere is very clear and present throughout. Like just like the sweeping epic feeling that you get of like the new planet, and like just the way that the action scenes are shot and just the general plot stuff. It's all very Tolkien, like, and that's very like he did a little bit of that with Clone Wars. He did a little bit of that with Rebels, and it was like, okay, let's bring this to live action. And it's that special sauce is spread relatively evenly, but I think could have done with a little bit here and there.
I think that special sauce is actually like the meat of the sandwich, because he directed episode 5, and that is like, that's the protein of the season. Like that is, even if you don't care, like if you do care about like the plot stuff, I think you can get the most satisfaction out of that episode. And that's where most of the satiation comes from for connecting with the character of Ahsoka in this series. Because like, you know, people had their complaints about like, well, she's folding her arms too much. It's like, there's a reason for that. We'll get there. And then like it's a lot of that stuff where I think this is just an overall thing that people have with TV now, where they think that like everything has to be like spoon fed in the first episode. And I'm like, that's a movie. You're talking about a movie, a self-contained thing. The TV show needs to stretch. But yeah, I think you could probably watch episode 5 of this and just see that there's something special without the context of the entire show, because like there's so much care and effort put into that episode. Like, the internet is correct. It has like a couple of the best shots in any Star Wars ever. It has a couple of the best moments, a couple of the best just like character interactions. And I think in terms of like, if you just put that in front of somebody that didn't watch anything else and said like, do you think there's something special about this episode? They would come across and be like, yes, this makes me want to watch the rest of it. Even if the slow burn of the first couple episodes is like not enough to pull them on.
You could pretty much watch that episode and not watch anything else of the season, and
it's just character study stuff.
Yeah, and it would pretty much work like without all the Hera looking for Ahsoka and stuff like that.
Right.
That would be a little bit like, all right, sure, I guess. But all the stuff in the World Between Worlds, just it works a damn treat. And we may as well address the Hayden in the room. It was so good to see him back, like properly this time. Obviously, I know he's in Obi-Wan kind of scattered throughout.
He still felt himself as an actor, as if he was doing episode 3 with Obi-Wan, which fitting, totally makes sense for that. Here he felt more comfortable to me, and he felt like he was coming off of that research of Clone Wars and stuff, and pulling in that, like, Matt's performance as Anakin a little bit more too, a little bit of the bravado instead of like the whiny kind of side of things. And it's really cool to see, man. It's really satisfying to see him like get to chew on that a little bit more.
Yeah, and I think it definitely had like room to breathe, and he had room to breathe. It didn't feel like the episode was rushing to get us through these vignettes. It was like this is just them interacting. Yes, it happens to be through the lens of Clone Wars and the Apprentice and just everything. But man, it was just awesome. And like, again, you said it yourself, the internet lost its damn mind over certain shots, but it was insane to see the silhouettes flicking between back and forth. That was awesome. Yep. Like, visually just worked so well.
And that's the stuff that like feels pulled out of the animated side of things, as opposed to like, because we didn't really get a lot of that through all of like the Skywalker saga stuff. So like, we had some bits of like mind game stuff with like Luke in the tree, like chopping off the head of Vader, and it's Luke's face inside of it, but it's like not stylistically this way. There was impressive stuff that was like effects stuff, but like not to like serve the story purpose with just like a quick little thing like that, which is, it's super, super cool. So during the premiere episode, did you have the same realization that a lot of people had, where it was like, oh, that time jump in Rebels at the end was much later than I thought it was?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. A few friends debated whether that was actually the same scene.
If it was they were kind of doing the same thing a second time or not. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm personally of the opinion that it is. Yeah. It's just looks a little bit different for live action, because obviously, and I bloody loved it. Like, I think it's a testament to casting. I think it's a testament to the cinematography, and I think it's just like the set design, literally everything. It works perfectly.
Yeah.
And just with the added context of what's happening in the episode, and like knowing, like seeing that in comparison to the end of Rebels, it's like, oh, just like perfect synergy. Like, it just works. And like, even just down to the little thing where Sabine just touches the mural ever so like slightly, like they know it. Like, it just, the attention to detail is perfect. And obviously it was always going to be because of Filoni, but I think it meant quite a lot seeing that.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that's really like, it was talked about with episode 5 particularly, but like the tying of the different eras together, this show does so much of it. Just so, like, the sequel stuff is in there. That's probably the lightest. It's original trilogy and prequels, obviously, because like the continuation of Clone Wars and Rebels and stuff is like, that's where it all is. But like, just the fact, like, they could have recreated the mural to like look more like real people and stuff, but it's like the choice to make it look like the animated designs is like, it's so good, and it's such a reward for the people who did watch the animated series to be like, look, they're not forgetting us as they move into the live action stuff. They know that these are still the look of the character in a way, even if it's translated into live action, it's still on the wall there. And it's like, feels good, man. It feels good to like, and like, there's that the whole audience that's just like, Star Wars hates its fans, or whatever. It's like, that's never been the case. But like, it's cool when these moments come around to be like a reassuring little thing in an episode just to be like, we're not forgetting about this part of the audience, because they're not. But like, it's cool. It's, you do a good job. You still want to have a pat on the back, even though you're doing a good job, kind of thing. It's that kind of vibe to me. And it's just, they did a really good job all around on this show. I said it already, especially with season 5 or episode 5, of like tying all of this history together. But then just like doing something new with it, with like going to another galaxy, which, yeah, they went to an empty planet. I get it. I understand if someone wants to grumble and be like, it could have just been another planet. Like, it's whatever. It could have been like far in the outer rim on a distant planet, whatever. But it's still cool to know that that's now a thing. That's like the potential of what that means going forward, of like, why Palpatine somehow returns from some distant exogoth. Like, it allows for things like that to make a little more sense. So I think it manages to do that stuff in a really cool way, which is,
yeah,
I'm thankful for.
It's just, I think the whole series is broad enough that it pays homage and references and is a love letter to everything in the past. And that works. For example, Rex showing up.
Yeah.
I cheered my damn head off when Rex showed up for, 10 seconds, maybe?
If that. Maybe 7. Yeah.
Yeah. But then it also completely opens the doors for any other filmmaker to come in or writer and be like, look, we've got this whole other galaxy over here. Like, if you want to tell stories that connects to that, we can do this. And
it doesn't force them into the timeline aspect of it, which is cool. Like, I'm excited for Mangold's like way in the past story, but like, we don't have to tie at all to this, which is just like cool.
It could be something completely new. But if they did want to make it, if they wanted to give audiences a window in through something that's already familiar, this would be a great place to start. That being said, you could quite easily tie the Ray movie into this somehow. Do you know what I mean? So it's one of those where it's like, however they approach it, it can be new and fresh, but still like you've got that connection that's there. So I'm glad it's not in like this galaxy. It's completely far-flung, far away.
Yeah, they did a lot of that. They used a lot of that language.
Yeah, just to really hammer it home. I was kind of worried pre-release, especially with like the World Between Worlds and the lore stuff of it all. I was like, this is going to be heavy and it's a lot to deal with. But because of this sort of like, it's not exactly a fresh start, but it kind of works in like a soft rebooty kind of way if they wanted to go down that route. Like, it just softens everything, and it was such a smart decision.
So we haven't even spoken about how they like, it was the most exciting news out of Celebration of Lars Mikkelsen being brought back for Thrawn, which, I think they're all, well, not one copy over there. All of my Heir to the Empires are somewhere over here.
Nice.
Even that unnecessary anniversary one with like the stuff in the sidebars of like extra details, and I'm like, this makes it hard to read, actually. But yeah, as a person who was around for that whole like really beginning of the extended universe stuff, that, remember, George Lucas said was never canon. But like, to be around for that, and then like, I read those books in the 90s when I was in school. Like, that was when we were told to like bring books in for like downtime or whatever. I brought in that trilogy and like Shadows of the Empire and like all that stuff. Like, Shadows of the Empire was another just like explosion of like cross media insanity that happened with Star Wars.
Yeah.
And all that anyone really remembers of it is the game. But yeah, it was like, it was just such a crazy boom. Like, and then like, because it was around the same time as a special edition. So it was like Star Wars fever was like happening for really the first time in my lifetime, even though I was always surrounded by it from like starting with seeing that episode from the Muppet Babies. But yeah, that's how I got into Star Wars, was Muppet Babies. Nice. So at least there's always a Jim Henson tie to everything. But yeah, the fact that during Rebels, we started hearing the rumblings of like, they're bringing Thrawn into this, they're bringing him back for this. Oh my god. And then to like get the performance from Lars Mikkelsen on the animated show, that was just phenomenal. And then to be like, oh no, what happens when they bring him to live action? It may not be as good. And then to actually bring him forward into the live action is just like, that's like a gift, man. Like we as a Star Wars fandom do not deserve gifts like that. So it is awesome.
The Star Wars fandom does not act nice enough to deserve things like Lars Mikkelsen.
Yeah, not at all. I mean, a lot of the castings in general, but like that to be allowed to see Thrawn like stay for the most part the same character. Granted, yes, he looks pretty different from I mean, he looks as similar as he could, but
they did the best they could in translating a blue man with red eyes.
Right, exactly. They didn't model the animated version on Lars Mikkelsen in the first place, so there's gonna be a difference.
No.
But like, just to be able to pull that together and be like, because man, that his performance is Thrawn even before like this stuff. I think this stuff is good. I don't think it quite captures what Rebels did. Granted, there's less time to, but like his performance as Thrawn in Rebels is like it's close to Vader. Like as far as like importance of the voice and the vibe of the character, like that is unbelievable casting to have him in the first place, and to just like be able to continue that is so good.
Yeah, and like Thrawn has like an air about him that is just like really intimidating. And if you think about it, physically, he doesn't do anything in this series. He just sort of stands there and talks to people.
Quiet strategy.
Screen,
that's it.
He quietly intimidating is like the phrase I've got in my notes.
Yeah,
because there's that commanding sense of just like, I am way more intelligent than you will ever be. I know everything you're going to do, and 3 steps ahead of that I've already planned. He's just, and Mikkelsen does that, but like effortlessly. And it's again, like, it's wonderful that they managed to bring him back.
Yeah,
I was getting sick of the Benedict Cumberbatch fan art, so let's be real.
Yeah, I don't think that was ever a good, like, not idea, because it was never an idea, but like a concept on the fan side, because it's just like you're just thinking of a skinny British man. Like, that's all you got with that idea. It's that's the thing with like this performance is Lars Mikkelsen is playing it as like historically, like people we have heard about in our history as far as like military minds. And that's why it's so fascinating, because like if you get somebody like a Cumberbatch or whatever, like they're gonna play villain more than anything. And the way Mikkelsen does it is like something out of like the era of Bridget on the River Kwai, or like something along those lines, where it's like, he's playing the villain, but he's playing like old Hollywood villain, as opposed to like kind of modern cartoon, not kind of thin on the surface level kind of villain. And it's just it is such an unbelievably, like, I this is all presumption, but like I would assume that was him coming into it being like, no, this guy, he's a military mind, he has to be smarter than that. Like, he has to have that air about him, as opposed to just being intimidating in the on the face value kind of way. So yeah, it's
but it even comes down to things like, you know, in the finale, when, spoilers if you've got this far and haven't watched the finale, when they're about to escape, and he's like, you were a great opponent, like, I'm genuinely sad that we didn't get to meet face to face. Like, there's something about that where it feels sincere, like he genuinely means that he's, you know, he would have actually quite liked to meet Ahsoka.
Yeah.
And it's not in a so I could beat you way. It's like you would have been interesting to battle.
The game of chess.
Yeah, 100%. And it just comes through in like a sincere is the only word I can think of. Like, it just, he just works. That's it. He works. It's great.
Yeah. Speaking of other castings, I think this show kind of does it better than a lot of shows, just because it's not like, you know, Obi-Wan has like, okay, we need the right casting for these name characters that we already know, but like, we can kind of get anybody for these other characters who are new. I think for a lot of people, these would be new characters. So like, it's a little bit of both. And so like, they did a really good job of balancing out, like, just like a character who can do likable stuff with like Sabine and Ezra and you know, they got some bigger name folks in there for like Mary Elizabeth Winstead for Hera and stuff. But like, I think overall they did a really good job of finding people who are likable, but like flawed at the same time in their performances. And so like, I think overall this probably takes the cake for casting on these shows in like umbrella kind of way. But granted, like I said, like, they have to, because there are too many main characters in this to like not do that. It's not like they can just pull in Bill Burr to do a side character like they did in Mandalorian, which personally I also don't think he's like the greatest in that, but like, he's just being Bill Burr. But yeah, I think this series, like, they did such a phenomenal job all around, not just with Thrawn.
Yeah, agreed. And I think the talent that they did get, like, I'm not sure if this is going to make sense, but the people that they got makes this feel more cinematic somehow. Like, yes, obviously it's still a TV show, and yes, TV series can feel, you know, cinematic, but
I know what you mean.
Everybody involved, like, if you stuck that on the big screen, it would just fly, and it flies at home. But I'm saying it would fly in a theater. It's
there's a like je ne sais quoi difference between a lot of TV and a lot of movies, and a lot of the time that can just be prep time for like getting scripts to like flow the right way in performances. But like, yeah, it's, you look at the CW versus like Nolan's Batman, like, there's both can be good. One feels
bigger,
heavier,
grander,
and more important, quote unquote, how a lot of people would put it. But yeah, it's just, it's a time and effort and budget thing a lot of the time. But yeah, I do agree that like Book of Boba Fett felt like a TV show. This feels like it is a little more cinematic, that could lead into the whole like theorized like Dave Filoni's quote unquote heir to the Empire movie that he's basically assuredly making.
Yeah, agreed. And I mean, you know, even down to somebody like Diana Lee, you know, Santo, who plays Morgan Elsbeth, even though she's not a small part, she's a supporting character, I reckon. the air that she brings to her is like menacing and creepy, but never over the top. And it's
Yeah.
just, when you have villains that are layered that much, it elevates everybody else. And I just, whoever did the casting needs a raise, basically.
Yeah, and we have not talked about Ray Stevenson at all, and it's like the saddest part of this whole thing, because he's like, I mean, obviously he's just great in general, but like he's so good in this show. Balin Skoll is like one of the most interesting new villains to come from Star Wars in a very long time. Like, regardless of the medium, like movie, TV, games, books, like I was really, really enthralled by his performance, but like just that, where that character is going, and like it leads off in a place where like clearly there's more story set up for that character. And like, I wish luck to the next person that's clearly going to have to take over that role, but like, yeah, there's going to be something missing from it, just because like Ray Stevenson does this thing in like all of his performances. Like, he's Frank Castle in Punisher Warzone, but like, which is the most like cartoony, over the top, rated R version of the Punisher you can have. And there's still like a carrying of sadness. There's still like, he still brings those things forward, even though it is like, and Lexi Alexander does a really good job with this movie of like just making it bombastic and ridiculous and campy and stuff. It's sort of that kind of thing where it's like if Joel Schumacher made a Punisher movie, is like kind of how that happened. But he's still
Jigsaw alone.
Yeah, exactly. Like the ridiculous stuff of like his brother, like, your face is messed up, my face will be messed up, and throws himself into the mirror and stuff. It's like insane stuff. But like he manages to like still have a human character in all of that, and it's a testament to his abilities to just like, and he was in the MCU and he was like a super likable character in that, where it's just like, the MCU didn't treat the Warriors 3 that well, but like he was more than Sif, even, I would say, like the most kind of like, I would love to just hang out and have a drink with him kind of guy, where it's just like
100%.
And that's Ray Stevenson. Like, that's just his whole deal. He's an intimidating stature, but like really warm-hearted and likable, and that comes through in every character. And it's like, it's just unfortunate to have that happen when when the world is finally recognizing him. Like, this weirdly like he was getting up there, and not like elderly, but like getting up there in age in terms of like Hollywood. So like to finally have the public kind of acknowledging like, dude, you're awesome. Like, I wish he got to see that.
I know, it's tragic, really. Because like I mean, next to Ahsoka, I'd say he's probably my favorite character of the series, realistically.
Yeah.
That sort of like, again, sort of stoic intelligence that he brings to it, that's never too, in a similar way to Mickelson, he never goes too over the top. He never, hands it up. There's a real sense of connection between him and Ahsoka, like right the way through the series. The dynamic he has with Shin, just everything, it's just so genuine. Like, there's so many layers to it. The bloke's an absolute unit. Yep. I don't know if it's just the costume or the shoulder pads.
No, dude is huge. Dude, yeah, he was always like a big dude.
Stacked.
Yeah.
And like, but because of that, it's surprising that he just holds himself in a scene and it isn't afraid to just stand there and talk, rather than just being like, shouldering his way into a conversation. Right. Yeah, he just stands there and it, creates this character in such a more meaningful way than anything. Yeah, obviously he starts off, slashing his way through rebel soldiers, but throughout that, he builds on it in a really fascinating way that isn't just like, I'm going to slaughter everybody like Darth Vader. So,
I think we learn that he's sort of the other side of the coin to Kanan specifically. Like he dealt with the same trauma and loss that Kanan did, but was probably in a less supported place at the time. And so he became, instead of being reinforced with the Force, he is sort of like disenchanted and jaded, and just like he's not really playing like classically dark side. He's just playing like chaotic, neutral in a way.
Kind of say like gray Jedi.
Yeah,
I suppose.
I try to avoid it as much as possible, but like it's the whole like the gray Jedi, but leaning to the negative. Yeah, it's and it's like, in D&D terms, he's like chaotic, neutral, or like not even that. I guess it's kind of on the evil side, but it's like he's in it for him mostly. And it's a means to an end on the journey that he's going on for the first half of this show, because he knows that it gets him to the place where he is whatever is looking forward to Baylan Skoll when he's standing on those Lord of the Rings statues. That's why he was doing this. That's the whole point of what he was doing, is whatever lies ahead for him there. And it's such a bummer that we're not going to see the fruits of that labor, of those breadcrumbs being laid to finally see what comes at the end of that. Yeah,
because I think it would be, whether it's in Filoni's film or a possible season 2, it's clear that there's more to that story.
Yeah.
Just with the visuals of the 2 statues and the one that's clearly missing, and it's straight up genuinely sad,
pointing to the horizon. Like he's straight up pointing to a mountain. So yeah, it's clear that he's going to find a temple, kind of thing. But like, man, really wish that. Wish we could see that followed through in the way it should have been, but world's the world. But yeah, it's a weird thing to try to transfer to at this point. But I think a lot of folks that weren't like super hot on it were kind of not loving the idea of Sabine being kind of like the secret protag at first, which eventually like Ahsoka came to the forefront more. But like in those first couple episodes, it was more Sabine heavy. And I was curious what your thoughts were on that, because to me, it works because that's how you get Ahsoka back to the play, because she's trying to be the stern mentor through the beginning of it. And it's harder to connect to her when she's in that position than it is to Sabine, who is the like, you don't understand me kind of character.
Yeah. Sabine was probably one of my favorite characters in Rebels, just because, like a lot of people, I like Mandalorians. I think they're awesome. Yes, they have cool armor, but and I was kind of drawn to that because of obviously the Darksaber stuff. Anyway, so I was really keen to see how they do Sabine in live action, and it was so refreshing that she wasn't introduced just like straight up in the armor, kicking ass, shooting people in the face, wearing the helmet, all of that. It was different. I found that refreshing. And I took it as like okay, so we're going to have the Ahsoka side of the story, and we're going to have the Sabine side of the story. And the Sabine side of the story is going to be the link to Ezra and all of that sort of the mystery side of things. So I was fine with the focus given to Sabine, given the time jump as well. It was like, where has she been for in time since Rebels? Like, what does her life look like now? Like, why is she sat by herself rather than hanging out with Hera and Chopper? So I was not complaining at all. That was awesome. Also, her introduction on the speeder bike, mate, that slapped.
real child Captain Kirk in the 2009 Star Trek.
Mate, Beastie Boys.
Yeah.
Get Beastie Boys playing.
in universe Beastie Boys. Yeah, it's cool because, like, well, first of all, we should address that, like, yes, we understand that people were upset that she abandoned the Loth Cat. I appreciate that. That's fine. My headcanon is that it's the one that was on top of the Loth Wolf that, like, when she and Ezra first were introduced to the wolves, it was that one. That's my headcanon. So it is the one that it can totally take care of itself. It's totally fine. But yeah, I really appreciated the fact that we got to a point in the series that, for the folks who felt like, why are we focusing on Sabine? Like, why is she detached from everything because we're not learning anything? I'm glad we got to a point where they flat out were just like, yo, her family died. All of these other people that she was connected to that she called family, they are also, like, a couple of them died, and Ezra's in a different galaxy somewhere else. That's why she's so intent on finding him. She needs to find family. And yes, there is Hera, but there's a whole structural situation going on with the New Republic with that. There is Ahsoka, but there is a break off that they had that, you know, got a little explanation, but not like fully, but enough to know that there was strain on that relationship. So the one person that she knew she could rely on and she needed was Ezra. So, like, yes, that's why she's going to do that. It's like, it gave an explanation to the people who were questioning. And I think it could have come earlier, because people who are, like, in the weeds with Star Wars are instinctively going to be like, well, yeah, her family got obliterated because Mandalore, which they, you know, on the Mandalorian, they talk about this a lot. They talk about how that whole civilization was basically wiped out and the planet is glass. So I think it is this thing that, like a lot of things with, like, it happened with Marvel for a while, where it's like, you kind of have to start thinking of the whole thing as where the story is. You can't just be like, well, here's Ahsoka. I like this show. Yeah. I like this character. I would like to. We're way beyond that at this point. Like, the lore for the, you know, the era that we're in is, and I think we've probably talked about this before, like maybe on the Boba Fett episode or Obi-Wan or whatever, but, like, the lore that's being set up in the shows is one big story. Like, we can't, like, overlook that anymore. It's not season 1 and season 2 of The Mandalorian, where it's like, okay, which I prefer the first one still, just because it is more like one-off monster of the week adventures or whatever. But, like, then it became more structural with an overarching story, and then it became the expansion of stuff, and, like, they brought in Luke, and then but, like, everything is connected, as Kevin Feige once said, right? So, like, it is that point where I think folks, unfortunately, kind of have to watch everything now. I'm sorry, but you kind of have to now. And that's not to say you can't do, like, the Cliff Notes versions of certain things, like the animated series. You can find the guides that are like, these are the episodes that you need to watch. Because, you know, there's like a Jar Jar episode of Clone Wars you don't really have to watch. Don't worry about it. You should.
You don't need to watch A Sunny Day in the Void.
Yeah.
Don't do that to yourself.
Yeah. And it's like it's like the Tales of the Jedi stuff. It's like, as awesome as that is, completely superfluous. It's additional stuff to, like, if you love these characters, it's more to connect to. But like at this point with the live action shows in particular, I think to fill in those gaps, like why would Sabine feel so lost? Mandalore's gone, bro. Like that's just, it is what it is. They talk about it a lot in these shows now. So like, yeah,
it's basically like if you didn't see the last season of Star Wars, then you're not going to know what's going to happen in this season.
Exactly.
Of Star Wars.
It's not the individual shows. Yeah.
No, it's one thing now, and I think that's never more clear than the Tolkien statues.
Yes, exactly.
Oh boy, yeah. That's gonna scramble some minds.
That's gonna be a lot of that's a big can of worms to open. It's like, who built those? That's a lot of lore set up.
How do they know what they look like?
Yeah.
How do they know what they look like? How do they know who went where? I just.
So did you? I don't know if you saw this at all. What are your feelings on the idea that Baylan Skoll, because of like the way he's dressed and stuff, that faction being potentially what leads to the Knights of Ren? I don't know if you saw these kind of discussions at all.
I did not see that. I don't hate it, but I don't love it.
I mean, there's not a lot of meat on those bones to connect them at this point. It's literally just like the costuming. But like, I do like the idea of like the potential of that happening, as long as it's makes sense and done well. That's great. Like, but
it's an interesting strand. Like, have read the comics where you sort of meet the Knights of Ren properly, and you see how Kylo actually met them and became one of them and all that. And it is a little bit dense of just like, sure, fine.
Yeah.
So I think it'd be interesting, and I depending on how it's done, I don't know. It's kind of one of those things where, Kathy Kennedy said it herself, like all roads lead to the sequels now.
Right.
So could be an interesting way of tying that up alongside, does Thrawn's return set up the First Order? Probably, realistically.
Yeah, I would say so.
If I had to guess. So yeah, I could come round to the idea of Baylan being part of or helping set up the Knights of Ren.
Well, it would just also be cool to see
the reason for that would be.
Right, yeah.
Like,
I would like to see like a Knights of the Round kind of thing happen with them, because it is like
Knights of the Ren.
Right, yeah. But like it's a thing that, like, listen, Star Wars pulls from modern and ancient mythology for literally 99% of its stories. So like that's something that we haven't necessarily gotten, even though we've had like Jedi Order stuff, and we've had like they've literally sat on a council in a circle and whatever, but like we don't have that kind of thing where it's like disparate knights coming together. None of them are necessarily good or bad. They're just kind of in it for themselves, but like, we'll help out if we need to, kind of thing. If it's because we see that like a bad thing for you would be a bad thing for us. And it's like, I think that would be a really interesting thing to see happen in Star Wars. Granted, maybe the Knights of Ren aren't the right way to do that. Maybe an Old Republic thing is, but like, I just think it's an interesting idea. It's an intriguing route that we could see these characters go. Again, unfortunate circumstances that it wouldn't be the same actors, but like it would certainly be a cool thing to see tie forward into the sequels and stuff, because there isn't enough like main media. There's the comics and stuff, but there just isn't enough main media about this thing that was set up in kind of a big way that was not necessarily like, all right, well, he fights against the Knights of Ren in the third movie. I guess that's his redemption.
Yeah.
But it's like, we never really knew them. So it's, yeah.
because obviously there's a kind of a little bit of that sort of thing in Star Wars Visions, obviously with the Ronin episode and stuff like that, and it's an interesting concept. And like you say, you meet the Knights of Ren in Force Awakens for like 20 seconds ish, kind of, not really. And then you see them get like butchered in Rise of Skywalker. Like, I don't know.
It could have not even been them. It really, like, it could have just been whatever stormtroopers, and like, yeah. So I don't know. I'm partly of the opinion of like, I don't need answers to everything, and maybe the Knights of Ren should just be one of those things that it's like, hey, like you said earlier about, being superfluous and stuff. Like, if you want to know more, the comics are there. Right. Like, go read them, sort of thing. But I don't know. I'd kind of be more keen just to. Seems a bit sad, and depressing, but just have Balin by himself, sort of mysteries of the Force type thing. Yeah, like he's just the unknown future was what he was looking for, kind of thing. Right. Like you could totally write it off that way, and it wouldn't be as satisfying to see like. Now he did this thing and it's over. But like, that was his off to the westerly seas, to bring it back to like Tolkien and stuff again. Like, that was him just like, I have found my peace. The statue points me that way. So yeah. So if they never brought him back, like, it's not a bad ending for him, realistically. Yeah. But it's sad. Yeah. Well, I think I covered my topics. Do you have anything else from Ahsoka that you wanted to bring up?
I do just have to, because I've not been able to get them out of my head. The Night Troopers. I loved their whole vibe, the aesthetic. It was awesome. The patched up gold was like a cosmic take on like Japanese kintsugi, and there was something so eerie about them that obviously turned a bit horror vibes in the finale. What are your thoughts on Star Wars zombies?
I'm totally fine with them. Like, I am not one who is against it. I am a big fan of like the Dathomir storylines and stuff, and that's a big part of that. I'm totally cool with it. I do wish we got visual more than just like the zombie mouth out of that one mask or whatever. I do wish we got a little bit more visual confirmation of who they were. Because there's at times, because like I was like, all right, are they brethren of Maul? Are they humans? Are they, because the only thing that they reference them at all outside of calling them troopers is volunteers for this, like, which is a weird thing. It's like, you need volunteers for this. Like, I don't think you're worried about that, guys. You're trying to reform the Empire, who was stealing children. I don't think you're worried about adults who like are volunteering for your afterlife program. But that was the only thing that I was like, that's kind of weird. I liked the actual presentation of it though. And it also allowed them to just like go ham with the like cutting them up and stuff. So like it allowed a little more intense lightsaber action than we usually see in live action. Cause a lot of the time it's like this super fantastic flourish stuff. But a lot, we don't usually see a lot of like cutting into people a lot of the time. Like there were some slow cutting into people shots, and not so much like the lightsabers going slow. I just mean like holding on a shot where like when Sabine puts one through the head of one of the troopers, it was like, we don't really see that very often in Star Wars. So yeah, I was totally okay with it. It's also just like, it's not new. It might be new for the live action only folks, but like, play the games. It exists. It's in the cartoons. Like
in the books.
Yeah, exactly.
Blackwing, you know, it's everywhere. I have to say, I loved the one shot with the lightsaber. That was awesome. And it reminded me of Last Jedi, because they do it in the throne room scene.
Yeah,
when she just like pops in the face with it.
Yeah.
I have to say though, in terms of the violence, like, it was cool. I loved it. It didn't go too hard, but there was a moment that did annoy me. It's when Ezra cuts the head off, and it like the camera like went behind the
That's a ratings
pillar,
thing.
like,
they have to.
I know, but it still annoyed me. I was like, come on, you've just shown like a chomping like jaw that's going to eat Sabine's face. Like,
yeah, you could see it. You were allowed to show it sticking through the head, but not the actual decapitation. Is a little bit weird.
That's
but
too much. It's a lightsaber. It's not going to, it's
cauterized.
It's fine.
Yeah.
Fine.
Which, counters what we learned in A New Hope, but that's fine. There was blood with that, but yeah. And we just real quick, we also didn't really talk about Chopper at all. Chopper, best boy. My favorite war criminal. There's the clip out for social. I'm so glad that they didn't like tone him down from like, they just let him be the cartoon Chopper. They let Dave swear, like, be in the background. Because that's the can't, like, yes, we have plenty of cantankerous droids, but there's like Chopper is Chopper. Like there's a lot of like there's a lot of C-3POs with like, hey, we didn't talk about that either. Great cameo. Love that cameo.
I was just balanced it right. Like, it wasn't too much. It was just a nice little sprinkle.
Exactly. And it the tie-in stuff with like explaining Leia and why she's not there and stuff, I think is good. I think that they could have, I mean, the timing on this, like, they probably didn't have enough time to go into like, this is like when people learned that she was Vader's daughter and kind of ousted her and stuff. Not the show for that probably, but like, I would like to see some of that come forward from the books. But yeah, like Chopper is just like, there's tons of cantankerous droids, as well as like there's anxious droids, and like there's plenty of C-3POs and like it's versions of R2 and 3PO, right? But like, Chopper stands apart from that kind of thing because he's so much more. Like, he's so like he's R2, like, but like your uncle who's just like fed up with the world. Like, he's just such a great character that like with R2 you can understand like the feeling in what R2 is saying, but like you can straight up kind of like hear what Dave is saying as Chopper.
I was gonna say, like, you are like decibels away from just straight up understanding those beats.
Yeah, like he straight up says like, what the fuck? Like, he's like, it's so good.
It's like when Hera's flying after the ship and they're trying to find the homing beacon or whatever. You could just straight up here and be like, I can't find it. It's not here. I've looked under there.
Oh man.
Oh, it was so good. But I do have to ask though, like, do you have any bits that you didn't like?
I didn't really have any like really stand out. Like, I don't like that. More so, I do think like they could have truncated some of the beginning of the season. Not like a ton, but like some of the stuff in the first 2 episodes, I think could have been like shortened a little bit to even 1 episode, even if it's like an extra long episode. But like, instead of being a 40-minute episode, it could have been like a 160-minute episode instead of 2 40s. It took me a bit to warm to the actor who's playing Ezra. I think he is good in the role. I think he wasn't given enough Ezra-isms right away. He got there, like the character got there, but like I don't think he was given enough to be like, oh yeah, this is clearly Ezra. Because like, we're introduced to him and he's just like, hi, Sabine, credits. Like, it's like a little too quick of an introduction. And then the next time we see him, they're just having like a quiet conversation that isn't like, there isn't enough familiarity yet between the two of them. And granted, you could say that that's because they haven't seen enough of each other. But like, the way that they bounce off each other a little bit later is the way that they bounced off one another in Rebels. And it was, she was just missing a little bit of that. Because like that is one of my favorite relationships from Rebels, is just their bickering back and forth and like pseudo sibling rivalry kinda. And it's like, I wish they got there quicker. I'm fine that they didn't, but like, I probably would have preferred if they got there a little bit quicker. That's all.
Yeah. I think part of that was obviously they were trying to get across to newer audiences that like this was something special. Like, you know, the fact that they found him like means a lot. And if they went straight into the bickering, I guess they'd be like, well, if they're so familiar, then why is it such a big deal that we had to find him? And
well, you also run the risk of like, you're setting up that he's a very important isolated character. Is he just going to throw the lightsaber over his shoulder? Like that pissed off a lot of people. So like, granted, there is a longer term connection to that character that like, again, I was fine with it. It's my second favorite Star Wars movie. But like,
same.
I think that it could have run the risk of being like, there's an importance factor to this character, but he's immediately cracking jokes. And I understand if they needed to avoid that in a way too. That may be a little more inside baseball than what actually happened, but like, whatever. I think it's a plausible thing that probably at least came up, even if it's like in passing or whatever.
Yeah, I get that. I think the only other thing for me is like the pacing every so often just felt a little bit uneven at times, especially post Ahsoka coming out of the World Between Worlds. And even in the finale a little bit, I was like, right, okay, cool. We're just going to run straight at this temple. Sure.
Right. Because they have to, because they're running out of time. And that is
literally. And
that is something that they do need to learn how to figure this out, because that is something that the Marvel shows and the Star Wars shows do. Right. Which is like, they like really don't front load the show to a point where it's like, it's almost like they realize like, oh wait, I thought we had another episode left, like every single show that they have. And so like, that's kind of what I'm saying too with like, I think we're approaching it from like, I was talking about the beginning of the season, you were talking about the end of the season. Like if they truncated the beginning of the season a little bit, it probably would have allowed them to play a little bit more with something a little more interesting than just like, let's try the front door. Which was literally what they said in the show, which is like, that's fine. But there could have been something a little more interesting of them like scouting or something, like one scene extra of like figuring something out.
Yeah. Even stuff like, you know, just the random, just send 2 TIE fighters out. Okay, well, if you're going to send 2 out, why don't you like send out soldiers as well and just kill everybody?
To be fair,
just do 2.
To be fair,
no? Okay.
With Thrawn, I always think that you can write that off as like, he's just testing the waters. Like he's because that's what I mean. That's the character, right? He's getting data points. Every single path he takes is a data point. So like, I think you can kind of shrug that off with his character specifically. Not if it was any other character, if it was like a Hux or like or like, you know, go back to that could even be just a stupid nod to like, don't waste firing a laser on them. Like you never know, but like they made enough literal nods in the show that it's a possibility.
Yeah.
Like to say like, literally far, far away to say, like, you know, whatever.
I liked
no,
that.
I liked it. I liked it.
On the nose, and I loved it.
Yeah, I liked it, especially because it's Huyang, who is like the lore keeper for this entire thing. So like, I appreciate that he was the one that said it too. But I just think like some of these things, there's ways we can write them off as like, it could have been this thing, it could have been this thing, and it's like, whatever. And I stopped thinking about it. But yeah, we didn't even, we're like getting to the point where I need to cut us off, but like, we got Hera and Kanan's baby boy, and that was really like that could have gone easily into like the CW TV show vibe, and
it could have got so bad,
and I felt like it was going to go that route, especially because it is like, it's hard to translate like green haired child, right? But like, I hope we get an explanation at some point where they say like, it's because Sabine was in his life at a young age, and she was like the hair color person of like, this is how I connect and this is how I show who I am, to be like, this is him wanting to be like his mom, and so Sabine would help do that and stuff. But without any explanation like that, it is just a boy with green hair. So it does come it does come off a little Beast Boy from Titans. So yeah,
it does. Yeah, I was worried when they first showed up. I was like, oh, okay, because you know, child actors can go one or two ways. Realistically, they can be great or they can be a little bit painful. And I was getting the painful vibe at first, and even when they landed on Cetos, and he's like, "Oh, I've got a feeling like something's not right," and I was a bit like, "Okay."
Yeah.
And then it was understated. It wasn't over the top, and it was all right. And I did like the nice touch of his pauldron shoulder armor that was Kanan's. That was a nice touch.
The itsy bitsy version of it.
Yeah.
The junior sized, yeah.
The junior sized Kanan pauldron.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm about in the same boat. I think it worked out, and for sure could have gone way worse than anything we got on screen. So yeah, and it's also like, it's just a nice nod for the people who like, Dave is clearly a fan of the extended universe and like finds ways to pull the stuff in that he wants to, and like he pulled in the name Jason for a reason. He like pulled in Thrawn for a reason. Like, it is for folks who were complaining when the extended universe stuff got uncanon or whatever, which again, I led off with like, remember, George said it was never canon. It was just its own thing. I think it's funny that a lot of people complain still to this day that happened, when it's like, dude, they're doing it all. Like, it may not look exactly the same, but like, there were contradictions through all of those books. So like, there was no like perfect through line, but like, they're giving you the stuff that you want. So you really ought to jump back in, because there's going to be plenty that is familiar to you enough that it's like, it should satisfy that section of the community that for some reason felt burned by that. Yeah.
You know, they're cherry picking. They're cherry picking all the right things and not going too deep. And
give me Prince Caesar, though.
Don't even try it. No, behave. You know, we're not going to get, you know, Luke Skywalker with an 8-pack. It's just not going to happen. Deal with it and move on. We're unfortunately not going to get Luke
with multiple U's.
Stop it. Right. Okay. You joke. I did see somebody have a theory that Marek was Luke. And I was like,
there were a lot of theories with that character, and I'm so glad it was literally just dust.
And yet it still worked because of all the Night Sister stuff, you know?
Yeah.
They played it perfectly. Yeah. I think the only other thing I have to say is, like, I really appreciated the stunt work on this.
Yeah.
Especially towards the end. Like I say, I know the finale wasn't a 10 out of 10 for me, but the fight between Ahsoka and Morgan was just top notch. I kept waiting, like there was a long stretch and I was like, okay, where are they going to cut? And it lasted longer than I was expecting. Yeah. And I was like, okay, I respect that. It was never going to be a one take fight, obviously, but like it looked awesome. And it's nice to see a little bit of care go into these things, because obviously it's really easy just to, you know, do action scenes in very quick successive cuts that just sort of literally undercut all of the weight behind it. And this kept that sort of old school Ronin, Seven Samurai kind of Kira Kurosawa vibes.
To which Thrawn specifically even says in the finale to Ahsoka that
literally
uses the word Ronin.
Calls her a Ronin. Yeah. Yes, loved it. So I really appreciate that, and I think it comes across. It just lends itself to that whole thing I was saying earlier, where it just feels more cinematic.
Yeah. I agree with all that, so I won't add any to it. Eammon, we're gonna call it there. Thank you again for coming back and being my faithful Star Wars bud.
Well, thank you for having me again. As always, I will always come back to be your Star Wars bud.
Cool. It makes it so much easier. Awesome. Well, hopefully soon, the SAG strike will end, so I can get back to doing some trailer reactions and stuff on the channel, because I stopped doing them during the writer strike, and then SAG joined up and started their own strike, and I was like, oh, okay, I got to put those off a little bit longer in solidarity. So hopefully that comes to a conclusion soon and everyone gets their fair pay and everything. Until then, I'll try to be doing a little bit more breakouts and stuff. Thankfully, we had a good moment with Chopper today that I can break out and put on social. Yeah, until then, it's just going to be intermittent episodes at whatever time I can drop them. So keep an eye out for those, I guess. Cool. Well, until next time, bye.